This is going to be objective 10. We are going to add and subtract polynomials. And now you know how to name them, right? You know what you're looking at. You know where the different terms are, right? We know terms are separated by pluses and minuses. We know how we're going to want to correctly write our answer. How are we going to correctly write our answer? In standard form, right? What does that mean in standard form? From the greatest degree down to the least degree, okay? So now let's start working with them. Now you know what you're looking at, right? Let's start working with them. So we're going to add and subtract today. So no definitions today. You did all those yesterday. So I'm just going to look. Here's example 1. And here's what I'm here to tell you. That you are going to, in order to add and subtract, we need to add and subtract things that match, right? We normally do our numbers with our numbers and our A's with our A's and our B's with our B's. But when you look at this, we just have X's, right? But they have to be the same variable raised to the exact same power. They have to match. You with me? I mean, identically match in order for you to add or subtract them. So, can we add an x squared with an x? Even though they're both x's, you follow? One is raised to the second power and one is raised to the first power. They don't match. You can't add them. So, we're going to only add our x squareds with our x squareds and our x's with our x's and our numbers with our numbers. Now, I'm going to show you kind of what we're doing here, but then we're going to actually, because, everybody agree we've never done this before? Because this is new to us, we are actually going to organize it and set it up and show a lot of work. But I want you to understand it's not as hard as you think. For example, the 2x squared is going to match with the, be more specific, negative 4x squared. And so when we add 2x squared and negative 4x squared, add your 2 and your negative 4 and you get negative 2. And is it x to the 4th? When do we add exponents? When are we multiplying? No, we only add the exponents when we're multiplying. If we're adding, they actually stay the same. This is going to become x squared. And so here's how I explain it. Take a look at my smartboard pens. I have one pen in this hand, and I have 2 pens in this hand. I'm going to add them together. Does that make 3 pens squared? No, it makes 3 pens. You with me? You don't add the exponents. 1p plus 2p, 3p. Okay, you don't add the exponents. The p's stay the same. So when you add them, they stay the same. Does that make sense? Okay, and so then the 5x is going to match with the 6x. And so when we add 5x and 6x, we get 11x. And then we're going to add negative 7 with positive 3. And so we add those and you get negative 4. Can you add these, your final answer together? Any of those match? Let me ask you, is it in standard form, starting with a degree of 2, then going to a degree of 1, then going to a degree of 0? So there's your final answer. So that's not that hard, right? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. What happens along the way? They get a little harder. They get a little more confusing. They mix things up. They add extra variables in. So here's what I'm going to tell you. And once you get used to this, you can do what we just did, and you can just add what matches. But for now, we're going to organize our information, and we're going to go step by step until we get good at this, because none of us have ever done this before. Okay, we're going to put it into a chart. Okay, and it is going to be a little bit of extra work, but I promise you, it will eliminate the careless errors. And I did it to first block today, and at the end of the class I said, how many of you actually like the chart? And I would say about 3/4 of the class said, I like it. You know, I'd like to do that the whole time because it's going to eliminate your careless errors. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to make a chart, and we're going to organize it by degree. we want our final answer to be in order from the highest to the lowest. So what degrees do we see? We see degrees of 2, we see degrees of 1, and we see degrees of 0. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to pull all these down into the chart. So where would I put the 2x squared? In the 2 column. And notice it's a positive 2x squared, so I'm going to put a sign with it to make sure that I have a sign with it. Then I'm going to go 5x next. 5x goes in the 1 column because it's a degree of 1. Everybody understand what I'm doing? Then I'm going to go negative 7. Negative 7 goes in the 0 column. 3 goes in the, and do I just write 3? Put a sign with it. I'm telling you, if you do not put your signs with it, you're going to make a careless error. What happens if you get 2 of the columns right and 1 of them's wrong? The whole thing is wrong. So you have really got, there's a lot of extra things going into this. You've really got to be cautious, careful, conscientious, okay? Negative 4x squared goes in the 2 column, and 6x goes in the 1. And again, all I've done here, guys, is done what? Grouped them. I've put my x squareds with my x squareds. I've put my x's with my x's, and I've put my numbers with my numbers. And now you can just add them. If you still struggle with positives and negatives, you can use your calculator to help you. If you will, use your plus key, hit 2 plus negative 4. And it will give you negative 2, and again, we said it's just x squared because we don't add them. Why don't we add the exponents? Because we're not multiplying. You only add the exponents when you're multiplying. When you add them, they stay the same, okay? And this will become plus 11x, and this will become negative 4. We still got the same answer. And everybody says, oh my gosh, Miss Corns, how many of you think this is a lot of work for nothing? Like I could do this in my head, okay? But I'm telling you, you got to trust me on this because I always start easy, okay? It is pretty easy today, but this chart is going to help you not make careless errors, okay? Not make careless errors. Any questions on this? Okay, let's look at example 2. Can somebody tell me what we're adding here? Specifically, what's my first polynomial called? It's a trinomial. Can anybody get really specific with a first name and a last name? It's a cubic trinomial. We're adding a cubic trinomial with a, actually just a cubic polynomial. The highest power we see is 3. Does that make sense? The highest degree we see is 3. So it's cubic, but it's 4 terms, so we call it a polynomial. Again, that's just technical stuff. But we're adding a trinomial with a polynomial. Okay? So what we're going to do first is we're going to order it. Okay? I see degrees of 3. And why do I start with 3? Because we want to start with the highest and work our way down to the lowest. Then I see degrees of 2. Then I see degrees of 1. And then I see degrees of 0. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to just pull all this information down into our chart and just organize and group our stuff together. Okay? If I were you, I would not like pull this guy down and then pull this guy down and then pull this guy down. If you pull it down all in an unorganized format, what's going to happen? Well, yeah, it'll be all unorganized and you'll probably miss something along the way. Does that make sense? You'll probably forget to pull something down into the chart. So I would work left to right. The 3y goes where? In the 1 column and up. That is a positive 3y. Again, give it a sign. The y cubed goes in the 3 column. Positive y cubed. The negative 5 goes in the 0 column. Negative 5. Keep working my way. And what am I doing as I work my way across? To each one. I'm marking them. I don't care if you, first block I circled them. Right now I'm boxing them in. I don't care if you like mark, give them a little tick mark or just something that you've got them down there, okay? 4y squared goes in the 2. Now, do I put it up here? Do I put it down here? Normally, does it matter? Normally I put the second number, normally goes underneath, right? So I just put mine underneath 4y squared. My negative 4y goes in the 1. My 2y cubed goes in the 3, a positive 2y cubed. And my 8 goes in my 0. Now, what do you want to put here? You can either A, put nothing, because what are you going to do with this guy? You're just going to drop the 4y squared down, okay? B, somebody said, could you X it or shade it in? Sure, that's fine by me. I've had students before, they like a golden egg. If you want to put a 0 in there, just so, does anybody feel like you really want something in that spot? Does that make sense? If you really want something, y'all are like, no. If you really want something in that spot, you can put a 0, I don't care. But he's just going to come down, okay? So tell me, what's y cubed plus 2y cubed? I hear 2y cubed. Any other thoughts? Javier says 3y cubed. Why 3? Because there's a 1 right here. So anytime you have a variable by itself, you need to throw a 1 in front of it. Everybody agree? There's always a 1 in front of it. So 1y cubed plus 2y cubed is, are you sure it's not 3y to the 6? We're not multiplying, so we're not adding the exponents. This is just 3y cubed. When you add them, they stay the same. Okay? So this guy we've already talked about, plus 4y squared comes straight down. Then this becomes, and again, you can, in your calculators, 3, hit the plus key, plus negative 4. You get negative 1. Everybody okay with that? What do I write? What's the best thing to write? Negative y. Very good. And if you put the 1, it's fine. Okay? It is a negative 1y, but remember, do you need the 1? No, you don't have to have the 1. So negative y plus 3. Can you add any of these guys together at the bottom? Nope. So here's your final answer. 3y cubed plus 4y squared minus y plus 3. Any questions? Moving right along. How about you try this one on your own? It threw you off. Purpose of this problem. I got one that says it threw me off. What threw you off? Which part of it? The positive 5x squared and the negative 5x squared. And the question is what do you put, right? Yes, and that is the purpose of this problem, okay? So every one I give you, it's not just random problems, just doing them. Each one has a purpose. What was the purpose of the second problem? To put the 1 in front of the y cubed. Does that make sense? So each one we do has a purpose, okay? So I see degrees of 3s, degrees of 2s, degrees of 1s, and degrees of 0. Okay? Is it matter if I did 0, 1, 2, 3? Why? Because I want them in standard form. That way all of our answers match. I mean, I'd still count it right, but it's going to make for some hard grading and for some confused people if you've got your column over here, and this column's over here, and this column's over here. We want to make sure that we're all doing it the same way, in standard form. Okay? And by doing the chart, it already puts it in the correct order so that you don't have to, at the end, reorder it. Does that make sense? We're already putting it in the correct order. So, where does the 5x squared go? In the 2's. Where does the negative 3x go? In the 1's. Where does the 4 go? In the 0's. Where does the 6x go? Just like this. Yes? Don't forget, I'm telling you. get your signs down there. You make sure every single one of them has a sign because, and everybody says, but it doesn't matter. I know that's positive. Yeah, but if you get used to dropping your signs now, what's going to happen with 3x? You would bring down a positive 3x instead of a negative 3. You with me? You've got to really make sure that everything is just so, or we're going to have some major mistakes, okay? So, negative 5x squared goes in the 2 column, and negative 7x cubed goes in the 3 column. Okay, again, you can fill in zeros if you want to, or you don't have to. Okay, so this guy's going to come straight down. What happens here? It becomes 0. So some people feel, here's option 1, some people feel they want to do this because it's the 5s are 0. How many put that? So we had several that put that. Anybody want to contest that? Why wouldn't we do that? Well, if you do this, what are you telling me? That there's a, so you're telling me that 5 plus a negative 5 is 1. Is that correct? So can't do that. So option 1 is out. Then I have some people that do this. Anybody do that? Plus 0, x squared. Well, that happens sometimes too, and I agree. 5 plus negative 5 is 0, but my question is, what is 0 times x squared? 0 times anything is 0. And what's all that plus 0? All that. So, what should we write? Nothing. Does that make sense? They cancel. They go away. Okay? If I have 1p, a positive 1p, and I subtract 1p from it, you with me? How many p's do I have? I don't got anything. Does that make sense? There's nothing there. Okay? So you don't write anything. So then from here we go and add and get plus 3x and then plus 4. So when you squish it all together, your final answer is negative 7x cubed plus 3x plus 4. Number one mistake is people write x squared right here. Okay? But again, if they cancel, it's gone. You don't have anything. Okay? Any questions on that? Everybody okay with addition? Everybody okay with putting them in standard form, just bringing them down and adding them together? Okay, let's go to subtraction. Okay, how many will agree with this statement? You would rather add than subtract. Most of us. So, let's change this to an addition problem. And then we can just add. Does that sound good? So, what we are going to do is, this says we're subtracting. Are we subtracting just the 4x, or am I subtracting all of this stuff? All of it. So what we're going to do in the very beginning, how many will agree? Basically what this means is when we are subtracting 4x, this really means that the 4x is what? It's a negative 4x. And when we subtract a negative 5, what does that really mean? How many will admit that you would probably look at 3 and negative 5 and put negative 2? Does that make sense? So what we're going to do on step 1 is we're going to apply this negative to each one of these just on the first step so that we don't mess our signs up. Does that make sense? And so when I apply this negative, when I subtract 3x squared, that 3x squared is actually a negative 3x squared. Everybody subtract 3x squared. Okay? So what this is called, anybody going to help me out? This is really what? Well, we're distributing, and you'll be happy to know, my copy, change, change lovers, we are going to copy, change, change. And everybody says, Miss Corns, I thought you said we weren't going to copy, change, change. What did I tell you copy, change, change was good for? When you were first learning something, right? We agree we are first learning how to add polynomials. So because we're first learning how to do this, we're going to go back to copy, change, change. And so those of you who have never heard of copy, change, change, here's what it is. You're going to copy the first part down. So we're going to copy this first trinomial down. Copy him. You are going to change the subtraction sign to a addition sign, and then we're going to change all the signs in our second trinomial. Does that make sense? Those of you who have never heard of copy, change, change, you copy the first part down, you change the subtraction to addition, and you change all the signs. The 4x now becomes a negative 4x. The negative 5 now becomes a positive 5. And the 3x squared becomes a negative 3x squared. Copy, change, change. And so the technical term for this is we don't subtract, we add the opposite. Repeat after me. We don't subtract, we add the opposite. We don't subtract, we add the opposite. We're not going to subtract, we are going to add the opposite of each one of these. Okay? And so now it's addition, right? You told me you would rather add than subtract, so here you go. It's an addition problem. So I see degrees of 2's, 1's, 0's. So take your new problem and fill them in and add them. Now it's so any questions when we fill them in? 3 goes here, plus 3. Negative 2x here goes negative 2x. Positive 2x squared goes here. Negative 4x, a positive 5, and a negative 3x squared. Any questions how I filled them in? Everybody got signs with theirs? Yes? Are you doing something to check or circle or box or something as you go across? I'm telling you, we find lots of careless errors. People forget, they'll go from here, and for some reason it's like they lose their train of thought, and then they skip this guy and start bringing him down, and then you forget a piece. Does that make sense? So how many of you are boxing, marking it off, circling something? So I would encourage you to do that. Okay, this does become negative x squared minus 6x. And again, if you have trouble with your positives and your negatives, do negative 2 plus negative 4. You get negative 6. Okay, and then this becomes plus 8. Any questions? Okay, 2 more examples and then we're done. So try this one on your own. It has purpose to it too. Can someone tell me the purpose of this problem? What's Harvey think the purpose is? Right. Does everybody agree? There's no degree of 3. So we start with 4's. Degrees of 4. Do I need a degree of 3? Right. So if it's missing a degree, don't feel like you don't have to go in order. It can skip degrees. Does that make sense? So you can go from a degree of 4 to degree of 2 to degree of 1 to degree of 0. Anybody put the degree of 3 in there? Is it okay that you did? It's fine. Does that make sense? You just didn't have anything under that column. You don't necessarily need it, though, if it skips a degree. So, can I go ahead and start filling everything in? No. What have I forgotten? We're not going to subtract. We are going to add the opposite. So copy the first part. It comes down like normal. Change it to addition. And then, again, all we're doing on step 1, because how many of us would forget that this 3p is really a negative 3p. We're subtracting 3p. So all we're doing on step 1 is we're just going to go ahead and give the subtraction to each one of those. So all these change. This becomes a negative, this becomes a negative, and this is a negative. They always become a negative? No, they just flip to the opposite sign. Okay, so now we can put it in with my new problem. So positive 7p goes in the 1's, positive 4p to the fourth goes in the 2s, or sorry, excuse me, in the 4s. Negative 8 goes in the 0s. Negative 3p squared goes in the 2s. Negative 2 in the 0. And negative 7p here. So this guy comes down. This guy comes down. What about here? They cancel, nothing. Okay, and then you get a negative 10. So 4p to the fourth minus 3p to the second. See, cautious, careful, conscientious, minus 10. How many got that? Yay, good. You ready for your last one? It has purpose. Here's your last one. What's the purpose of this one? It's got more than one variable. Okay, you copy it down, then we'll talk about it. Match. Okay, this one is all going to match. This has a degree of, when it's all one term, what do? Add the 1 plus the 4 is a 5. This has a degree of 7. This has a degree of 2. This has a degree of 7. This has a degree of 2. This has a degree of 5. And they are all going to match. But let me explain something to you before you start writing down. Okay? What if I have like a 2ab plus a 3cd? What does this have a degree of? 2. What does this have a degree of? 2. So would I put them all in the 2 column? They're not the same. So, okay, so I need to have 2 separate columns for them, even though they have the same degree. Do you understand that? They're not this, they don't match. So they need to have their own separate columns. So I put all my ABs in one column and I put all my CDs. And everybody said, well, they're the same degree. Which one do you put first? It really doesn't matter. In this case, I would put the ABs first. Why? Alphabetical. Okay, well, what if I have something like this? What if I have negative 3x squared y plus 5xy squared? What's the degree here? 3. What's the degree here? So do they match? Can they go in the same column? This has an x squared. This only has an x. See? This has a y, but this one has a y squared. They're not the same. You could only add x squared y's with other x squared y's. And so they're both degrees of 3. Everybody understand they don't match? Does everybody see that they don't? Even though they're both x and they're both y. These are both A and both B, but they don't match identically. So they're going to have to go in separate columns. So what I want you to understand is, which one, up here you said do alphabetical. Well, what do you do here? Pick one. Does that make sense? We try to get them in descending order, but if they're the same and they need to go in 2 separate columns, you with me? And they're the same XY, and you don't know which one to do, just pick one. Does that make sense? They got to match exactly. Same variable to the same powers, okay, in order to be in the same column. So this one up here, though, we can do in descending order because we're going to have degrees of 7, degrees of 5, and degrees of 2s, okay? And our 7s are actually a cubes b to the fourth. And our 5s are a b to the fourth. And then our 2s are a squareds. Does that make sense? So tell me, where would I put my 7? A b to the fourth. So a positive 7 a b to the fourth. Where would I put my negative 3 a cubed b to the fourth? In the 7 column. Where would I put my negative 7a squared? In the 2 column. Where would I put my 8a cubed b to the fourth? In the 7, so positive 8a cubed. And everybody says, are they the same? Do they match? Same variables to the same powers. Yeah, so we're going to be able to add those, okay? All right, we're going to put our positive a squared here just like this. I'm telling you right now, this is a number, another very, very careless error. People don't put this, and then what do they put for their answer? They put just negative 7 a squared. Does that make sense? They forget to add the 1 to it. Okay? And then we've got negative 2ab to the fourth. So everything is now matching, even though it's double variables. Okay? So what do I get here when I add? 5, not a to the 6th, b to the 8th. Why? They're adding so we don't do nothing. I agree. Okay? We're not multiplying. When we multiply the powers, we add the exponents. When we add, they stay the same. A cubed b to the fourth plus 5ab to the fourth minus 6a squared. Any questions on that? Did I lose anybody on the double variables? So again, just make sure they match exactly. Try to get them in order by degree, okay? But if they're the same degree and they're the same types of variables, just put one of them in one column and one of them in another column. Okay? You can only add and subtract things that match exactly, so make sure they do match.